Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The morning my mother decided to sue me, I was eating toast at my kitchen table in Chicago, watching snow collect on the fire escape outside my window, listening to a podcast about migratory birds. It was the kind of quiet Tuesday morning I had spent years building, carefully, deliberately, the way you build anything worth having. Slowly and without announcing it to anyone. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. Ms. Reyes. The voice was clipped, professional. My name is Douglas Hale. I'm an attorney in Phoenix. I've been retained by your parents, Carmela and Robert Reyes, to pursue a civil claim against you for financial restitution. They allege you have been uncooperative in providing financial support to the family despite your means. I'm calling as a professional courtesy before we file. I set down my toast. Outside, a pigeon landed on the fire escape, looked at me and flew away. Thank you for the call, Mr. Hale, I said. My attorney will be in touch. I hung up, finished my toast, and then I sat there for a long time. Not crying. Not panicking. Just remembering. Because the thing about being sued by your own mother is that it doesn't arrive like a shock. It arrives like the last page of a book you've been reading for 30 years. And you already knew how it ended. I grew up in Glendale, Arizona, the second of 3 children and the only one who seemed to understand from a very young age that something in our household ran on a different kind of currency than love. My older brother Marcus was my parents' pride. The charming one, the funny one, the one my father coached in Little League and my mother drove to every practice with coffee in her hand and devotion in her face. My younger sister Priya was the baby, born 12 years after me when my parents were briefly, confusingly happy again, and she was treated with the softness of a second chance. I was the middle. The useful one. It started the way it always starts in families like mine. So gradually you don't notice the architecture being built around you until you're already living inside it. I was good at school and that was fine because good grades didn't cost anything. I was responsible and that was fine because responsibility is convenient. I was quiet about my feelings and that was better than fine. It was preferred. By the time I was 16, I was babysitting Priya every Friday while my parents went to dinner. By 17, I was tutoring 2 neighbors' kids for cash and handing a portion of it to my mother every month without being asked. I just understood that it was expected, the way you understand the rules of a game nobody has officially explained to you. When I got a full scholarship to Northwestern for accounting and finance, my father said at dinner, "Well, at least she won't cost us anything for college." My mother nodded and passed the rice. I moved to Chicago the following August with 2 suitcases and enough savings for 3 months of rent. I did not cry when I left. I had already cried everything out the year before, during a week when I was so sick with the flu that I couldn't get out of bed, and my mother had come to my room not to check on me but to ask whether I could still watch Priya that Friday because they had a reservation. That was the week I understood what I was to them, and I filed that understanding somewhere deep and load-bearing inside myself, and I got up on Saturday morning and I got to work. Chicago was the first place in my life that felt like mine. Northwestern was everything I had hoped. Intellectually alive, demanding in ways that felt like respect rather than extraction. I threw myself into my coursework with the particular ferocity of someone who has discovered that excellence is available to her if she simply reaches for it. I graduated in 3 years. Summa cum laude. I had 2 job offers before I'd returned my cap and gown. I took the position at Meridian Financial Group as a junior analyst. I rented a studio apartment in Logan Square that smelled like old wood and radiator heat, and I filled it with plants and a good coffee maker and second-hand bookshelves, and I was happy in a way I hadn't known was available to me. My closest friend in Chicago was Diane, a tax attorney I met at a professional development seminar when we were both 23, who laughed loudly and had opinions about everything and made me feel for the first time in my adult life like someone worth knowing. She introduced me to her running group. I ran 3:10 Burmese Chats that first year. Nothing remarkable but the kind of thing that belongs entirely to you, that nobody can take credit for and nobody can ask you to share. I was promoted at Meridian twice in 4 years. By 27 I was a senior analyst managing a regional portfolio of mid-sized institutional accounts worth a combined $340 million. I dressed well, kept a clean apartment, took a pottery class on Wednesday evenings, and fell briefly and productively in love with a structural engineer named Paul who treated me with a thoughtfulness I didn't initially know how to receive. We were together 2 years before agreeing gently that we wanted different cities. I still consider that relationship one of the better things that happened to me in my 20s. I learned I was capable of being loved without earning it. My parents knew in general terms that I had a good job in finance. They did not know specifics because I had learned early that specifics in my family were not information, they were ammunition. The calls from Phoenix started small as they always do. Mom called in my second year in Chicago to say the water heater had gone out. Could I help? I sent $800. I recorded it in a spreadsheet I'd started without consciously deciding to. Just a habit, the accountant's reflex, everything documented. 3 months later, Marcus had lost his job and needed help with rent. Just 2 months, Mom said. I sent $1,400 each month for 4 months and documented every transfer. Marcus never mentioned it. He certainly never paid it back. The calls became quarterly, then monthly, then irregular and urgent. Always framed as emergencies, always accompanied by a subtext I had learned to read fluently. You are lucky you owe us, this is the least you can do. A roof repair. Priya's school fees. Dad's truck transmission. Mom's dental work twice. A failed business. My father started selling custom outdoor furniture from their garage, into which I poured $28,000 over 14 months before it collapsed under its own mismanagement. I sent money because I had it. I sent money because I was the daughter who was good with money, and it would have felt wrong not to use that in service of people who needed it. I sent money, I think, because some part of me still believed that if I contributed enough, I might eventually become the kind of family member whose contributions were noticed. I documented everything. Every wire transfer, every check, every Venmo with a time stamp. Every phone call where an amount was requested. I began quietly to record these. Not in anticipation of anything. Just because I was an accountant. Numbers without records are just stories. At 28, I discovered the credit card. A notice from a bank I had never used arrived at my parents' address, which was still listed as my address on several old documents I hadn't updated, and was forwarded to me. A credit card in my name, opened 2 years prior, carrying a balance of $22,000. I sat with the notice for a long time. Then I pulled my credit report. 4 cards. 4 accounts opened in my name, presumably with my social security number and my parents' address as the billing address. 2 of them nearly maxed. Combined balance, $76,400. The impact to my credit score was significant. The documentation of who had opened them and when and what had been purchased, furniture, appliances, groceries, 2 international flights, was for someone in my profession not difficult to reconstruct. I called my mother. Mom, I said carefully. I just received a credit card statement in my name. I didn't open this account. There was a pause. Oh, that. Your father and I needed it when the business was struggling. It was just for a little while. We've been paying the minimum. The minimum on $22,000. We didn't think you'd mind. You have money. I sat in my Logan Square apartment surrounded by my plants and my pottery and my bookshelves, and I was very, very quiet for a moment. I'll call you back, I said. I didn't call back. Instead, I called my friend Diane, who was a tax attorney and who had once mentioned a colleague who specialized in financial fraud. His name was Kevin Park. I called Kevin the following morning. And then I waited. I continued sending the monthly support. I needed them not to know I was watching. I froze all 4 fraudulent credit cards and disputed the balances, initiating a process that would take months and generate a paper trail that would have satisfied the most demanding auditor I'd ever worked with. I worked with Kevin quietly, methodically, building the kind of file that would speak for itself in any room it was carried into. For 2 more years I waited. I reduced the support gradually, not suddenly, not dramatically. I stopped the furniture business payments, which had anyway already failed. I reduced Marcus's housing support. I maintained the mortgage assistance because I wasn't sure yet what I intended to do with any of it. I was watching. I was documenting. I was, as I would later describe it to Kevin, gathering. I was 31 when my parents' attorney called. In the 18 months before that call, I had quietly stopped all financial transfers. I had not announced this. I had not explained it. Mom had called 3 times asking if everything was okay with my accounts. I said yes, everything was fine. I said I had some investment restructuring happening. I said I'd be in touch. The restructuring was real. It just wasn't the kind she was thinking of. Kevin Park was 52 years old, a former federal prosecutor who had spent the second half of his career representing clients in exactly this kind of case: financial exploitation within families, which he said was both more common and more legally complex than most people assumed. He had kind eyes and a precise way of speaking that reminded me of the best professors I'd had at Northwestern, and when I laid out the full scope of what I had: 6 years of wire transfer records, the fraudulent credit card documentation, the recorded phone calls, the forensic accounting report his associate had prepared, he looked at me across his desk and said, "Ms. Reyes, I want you to understand that you have built, essentially, a prosecution." "I know," I said. "Most clients in your position are either too emotionally compromised to do this work or too financially unsophisticated. You are neither." "I am an accountant," I said. "And I am very tired." He nodded. "That comes through in the file." We filed our response to the civil claim within 2 weeks of the initial attorney call. The response included a counterclaim. Kevin filed for an emergency order to preserve records held by my parents related to the fraudulent accounts, which was granted. He submitted notice to the court that we intended to enter financial evidence in response to the restitution claim. We also, separately, filed a report with the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit regarding the credit card fraud. That investigation would move at its own pace, separate from the civil proceeding. My mother called me 4 times in the 3 weeks between the filing of our response and the court date. I let all 4 calls go to voicemail. Not out of cruelty, I had simply nothing productive to say, and I had learned over 31 years that conversations with my mother required me to manage her emotions at the expense of my own clarity. I needed my clarity. Diane drove from her office to mine the evening before the hearing and brought Thai food and sat across from me at my kitchen table where the snow had been replaced by April with muddy Chicago rain. "How are you actually doing?" she asked. "I'm tired of this being the most interesting thing about me," I said. She laughed and then she looked at me more carefully. "That's a real answer." "It is." I ate my pad CEW. "I have accounts to review tomorrow afternoon. After the hearing, I'm going to come home, make coffee and look at spreadsheets, and it's going to feel like the best thing I've ever done." "You're going to be fine," she said. "I know," I said. "I've known for a while." The Cook County Courthouse on a Thursday morning in April smells like old paper and burnt coffee and the particular institutional calm of a building that has seen everything and is therefore surprised by nothing. I arrived 20 minutes early in my charcoal blazer and sat in the hallway outside the hearing room with Kevin and his associate, a young woman named Priya, a coincidence that I decided not to mention to anyone, who had organized our exhibits into 4 bound volumes with color-coded tabs. I saw my mother enter with her attorney at 8:53. She was wearing her church clothes, a navy blue dress, pearl earrings, and she had done her hair carefully, and for a moment, looking at her across the marble hallway, I felt the thing I had spent years trying to locate a name for. Not quite grief and not quite anger, but something in the space between them that doesn't have a clean word in English. She had been a real mother once. When I was very small, she had read to me every night and made me soup when I was sick and called me Mija in a voice that was soft and meant it. I don't know exactly when that mother was replaced by the one sitting across the courtroom aisle from me now. I suspect it was gradual, the way erosion is gradual, and that she may not even know it happened. I didn't look at her again. I looked at Kevin, who nodded once, and then I looked at the judge's bench and I waited. The hearing opened with opposing counsel, Douglas Hale, in a gray suit that needed pressing, presenting the claim. He was practiced and smooth and delivered the case with a confident simplicity. His clients had raised their daughter, provided for her education, supported her development, and now, in their later years, found themselves in financial difficulty while their daughter, despite evident means, refused to provide assistance. He invoked filial piety in 2 separate sentences and used the word ingratitude 3 times. My mother sat straight in her chair throughout and nodded at key moments like a woman who had rehearsed this. "Your Honor," Hale concluded, "the family is seeking restitution of $180,000, representing their estimate of the financial support they are owed given the disparity in financial means between Ms. Reyes and her parents." The judge, a woman in her 60s named the Honorable Christine Aldrich, whose reputation Kevin had described as no-nonsense with a long memory for bad faith, made a note without expression. "Mr. Park," she said. Response. Kevin rose. He was unhurried. He buttoned his jacket. "Your Honor, thank you." Before I respond to the substance of the claim, I'd like to enter into evidence exhibits A through R. He nodded to his associate who carried the first bound volume to the clerk. These exhibits document $280,000 in financial transfers made by my client to or on behalf of the Reyes family over the past 6 years. Wire transfers, bank records, money order receipts, and in some cases recorded verbal requests for funds. He paused. In addition, Exhibit S is a forensic accounting report documenting 4 credit card accounts opened in my client's name without her knowledge or consent, carrying fraudulent charges totaling $76,400. And Exhibit T is a police report number filed with the Phoenix Financial Crimes Unit 14 days ago in connection with those accounts. The room was very quiet. Judge Aldrich looked at Exhibit A for a long moment. Then she looked at Hale. "Mr. Hale," she said, "were you aware of this documentation when you filed this claim?" Hale's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, my clients did not." "I'm asking whether you were aware." "Pause. I was not provided with complete information, Your Honor." She looked at him for a long moment. "Will take 15 minutes. In the hallway, I stood by a window and watched traffic on the street below. Kevin stood beside me and said nothing for a while, which is one of the things I most appreciated about him. "She's looking at the wire transfer records," he said eventually. "I know. Hale is probably having a very difficult conversation with your mother right now." "I know that too. I watched a delivery truck navigate a left turn. I thought about my pottery class, which I had missed 3 Wednesdays in a row. I thought about the Migratory Bird podcast I had been listening to when the first attorney call arrived. The part where the ornithologist explained how certain birds navigate by magnetic field, by starlight, by an internal compass so precise it cannot be disrupted by weather. I thought, I have always known where I was going. I just didn't announce it." When we returned to the hearing room, Judge Aldrich looked at both attorneys and then looked at me directly, which was unusual and felt deliberate. "Ms. Reyes," she said, "I want to make sure I understand the timeline. You continued to provide financial support to your family during the period when you discovered the fraudulent credit accounts." "Yes, Your Honor." "Why?" I had thought about how to answer this question because I had known it would come. "Because I wanted the record to be complete," I said. "I wanted there to be no ambiguity about the nature of the relationship and which direction the financial support was actually flowing." She held my gaze for a moment. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I'm going to ask you directly. Has your client seen Exhibit S before today?" Another pause from Hale. "Longer this time." "I believe my client was aware of the accounts, Your Honor." "She was aware." Judge Aldrich set down the exhibit. "Mr. Hale, I want you to understand that the existence of a pending financial crimes investigation materially changes the posture of this proceeding. I am not going to adjudicate a restitution claim in the same proceeding where your client may be the subject of a criminal complaint arising from the opposing party's financial records." She paused. "I am also going to say for the record that the documentation entered as Exhibits A through R represents one of the more thorough financial records I have seen presented in a civil proceeding at this level. Your client's claim that her daughter has contributed nothing to the family is not supported by anything in this courtroom except her own statement." She looked at Hale with an expression that was not quite contempt but was certainly not patience. "I'm dismissing the restitution claim. The counterclaim will be scheduled for a full hearing. In the interim, I am issuing a preservation order on all financial records held by the respondents." She set down her pen. "We're adjourned." The gavel came down. My mother stood up too fast. Her attorney put a hand on her arm. She looked across the room at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. Not anger, which I knew well, and not the particular flatness she used to dismiss me, but something rawer and less composed. Something that might, in another story, have led somewhere. I looked at her for a moment. I thought about the soft voice that had once said Mija. And I thought about the $800 water heater and the furniture business and the 4 credit cards and the 31 years of accumulated arithmetic. I thought about the ornithologist explaining the internal compass that cannot be disrupted by weather. I picked up my portfolio, nodded to Kevin, and walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, his associate handed me a copy of the dismissal order and said, "That went about as well as it could." "Better," Kevin said. He looked at me. "How are you doing?" "I need coffee," I said. "And I have a 2:30 call." The Phoenix Financial Crimes Unit completed its investigation 4 months later. My parents were charged with 4 counts of identity theft and financial fraud. The charges were serious. Their attorney negotiated a plea arrangement that included full restitution to me, the $76,400 in fraudulent credit card charges, along with court fees, and 3 years of supervised probation. No prison time, a fact about which I had mixed feelings and ultimately made peace with. The restitution money, when it arrived, felt less like vindication than like the closing of a very long equation. The civil counterclaim was settled before the full hearing date, with my parents' attorney approaching Kevin 2 weeks before the scheduled proceeding with an offer. We accepted a sum that did not approach the full $280,000 in documented support. I had not expected it to, but was sufficient, and was accompanied by a signed agreement that contained language Kevin described as unusually comprehensive in its acknowledgments. I did not attend the settlement signing. Kevin handled it. I was in a client meeting. Marcus called me once, 3 weeks after the hearing. He said, "I didn't know about the credit cards." I said, "Okay." He said, "Mom said you were exaggerating." I said, "The forensic accounting report is a matter of public record." There was a silence, and then he said, "This is going to be really hard on them." I said, "I know." And I hung up, not out of anger but because there was nothing else to say that would have been true and also kind, and I had learned to choose truth when I couldn't have both. My sister Priya was 20 years old and in her second year of college in Arizona. She sent me a text 3 days after the hearing that said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. Can we talk sometime?" I wrote back, "Yes. When you're ready." We had dinner over video call 2 months later. She cried. I didn't, not then. I cried later alone, which is where I prefer to do it. She was 20 years old and not responsible for the architecture she had been born into, and I thought about the soft voice that had once said Mija and decided that Priya deserved something different. We are still in contact. Carefully, slowly. It is one of the more delicate things I am building. My mother did not contact me. I did not expect her to. I am not even now sure what I would want from that conversation, which may mean I am not yet ready to have it, or may mean there is no version of it that serves either of us. I leave that door neither locked nor open. I leave it the way you leave a window in autumn, not warm, not cold, requiring a decision I am not yet making. The Wednesday after the hearing, I went back to my pottery class. My instructor, a 60-year-old Croatian woman named Marta who had the hands of someone twice as strong as she looked, watched me center a piece of clay for 5 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "You are thinking about something." "I'm trying not to," I said. "That's the problem," she said. "Don't try not to think. Let the thinking happen and put it in the clay." I pressed my hands around the spinning form and thought about the ornithologist and the magnetic compass and the 31 years and the 4 bound volumes of evidence and the moment the gavel came down and the moment in the hallway with my mother's eyes finding mine across the marble floor. And I pressed all of it into the clay, and the bowl came out uneven and thick on one side and I kept it anyway. It sits on my kitchen shelf now, next to the good coffee maker, in the apartment where snow collects on the fire escape in winter. When I look at it I think, this is what it looks like when you put all of it somewhere. Not beautiful. Not broken. Just made. I am 32 years old. I run on Saturday mornings along the lake shore. I have a promotion I am being considered for that would make me a managing director, which is a title I have wanted since my first year at Meridian and have not told anyone I wanted, because I have learned that wanting things quietly is how I protect them until they are mine. Diane and I have dinner every other Thursday. I am taking a 5-day trip to the Pacific Northwest in June to see the rainforest, which I have wanted to do since I was a child reading a library book about old-growth trees. The kind of wanting that belongs so entirely to you that nobody can take credit for it. My credit score, restored by the fraud resolution process, is now 814. I think about my mother sometimes, not with the particular weight it used to carry, but the way you think about whether that has passed. It happened. It shaped everything. It is not happening now. What I know is this. I documented everything because I am an accountant and numbers without records are just stories. But somewhere inside that habit was something more than professional reflex. Somewhere inside every receipt, every wire transfer record, every time-stamped phone log, was a version of me that refused to let the story be rewritten. That refused to be made into someone who had given nothing, contributed nothing, mattered to no one. The judge read the file. The record spoke. I walked out of the courtroom and got coffee and went back to work and have been going back to work ever since. That, I think, is enough. That is more than enough. That is everything. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been the one who gives and is somehow still called selfish, leave a comment below. And if you know someone who needs to hear that documentation is not cruelty, that protecting yourself is not ingratitude, share this with them. Subscribe for a new story every week.